Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm Steve Lance. Could Nancy Pelosi visit Taiwan tomorrow? The White House forecasts how the Chinese military could react if in fact she does, while vowing the U.S. will not be intimidated. NTD's Iris Tao has the details.
Speaker Pelosi, will you be going to Taiwan?
Still no word from the House Speaker on a possible stop in Taiwan, even as she kicks off her Asia trip in Singapore. The reports say it is happening. The Wall Street Journal says Nancy Pelosi is meeting with Taiwanese officials on Tuesday and Wednesday. And CNN says the Pentagon is trying to keep Pelosi safe as she visits the self-ruled island that Beijing claims as its own.
I haven't seen any such confirmation.
And the White House, though declining to confirm her specific schedule,
the Speaker's flying aboard a military aircraft, so we'll know.
And is downplaying the potential Taiwan visit and urging Beijing to stay calm.
If she goes, it's not without precedent. It's not new. It doesn't change anything. I mean, we have said that we do not support Taiwan independence.
And if the visit indeed happens, Pelosi will be the highest-ranking American official to visit the close U.S. ally in 25 years. Her predecessor as Speaker, Newt Gingrich, traveled there in 1997, though in a very different geopolitical environment. Beijing ramping up its threat, saying the Chinese army, quote, won't sit idly by if Pelosi makes the trip. And NSC spokesman John Kirby saying Beijing could respond by firing missiles in the Taiwan Strait or making a large-scale entry into Taiwan's airspace.
It's not so much that there might be a direct attack, but it raises the stakes of miscalculation and confusion, which could also lead to unintended consequences.
Kirby also discourages Beijing from turning the visit into a conflict, while adding,
"We will not take the bait or engage in saber rattling. At the same time, we will not be intimidated."
And Kirby says President Biden told Xi Jinping in their call last week that Congress is separate from the executive branch and that Speaker Pelosi makes her own decisions. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
On Capitol Hill this week, Senate Leader Chuck Schumer's top priority is passing a $700 billion budget bill. There are a number of changes to the tax code, including more ability for the IRS to crack down on taxpayers. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more on how this proposal could impact your bottom line.
Democrats this week are racing to get a budget bill to the finish line. The measure is referred to as reconciliation. A number of changes to tax policy are included, like granting $80 billion to give the IRS more capacity to monitor your returns. It also proposes a 15% minimum tax on corporations. Why should the average American care if companies making more than $1 billion a year are going to be hit with higher taxes?
Because once you start discouraging businesses from making more, from being worth more, that means they're not hiring as many people and they might be laying off people. You know, there's also a scenario, let's say you're a $1 billion company and you want to bring your sales, your revenue below the $1 billion so you don't hit that 15%. One way of doing that is closing a factory, closing stores.
The goal is to cover the costs of new investments in healthcare and renewable energy. They aim to generate upwards of $700 billion.
It's always very optimistic, the numbers that they give. And I think what's going to happen is that if this bill passes with all these provisions, you're not going to see that amount of revenue ever come in. You know, while the IRS and politicians think that you can just keep on shaking down companies for more money in the form of higher taxes, companies actually change behavior. And especially in 2022 and future years, it's going to be easier for companies to leave the country and set up shop elsewhere.
And if companies do choose to leave the country, the government is even less likely to rake in the tax revenue needed to cover the new spending. The reconciliation bill also contains other changes in tax policy. This includes encouraging Americans to buy so-called clean cars. Lower and middle-income Americans can get a $4,000 tax credit for buying a used clean car and $7,500 for buying a new one. There are also billions of dollars in tax credits to encourage companies to build up clean technology manufacturing facilities to make electric cars, wind turbines, and solar panels.
This is a balanced bill that gives us energy security this country desperately needs. It gives us a pathway forward. It gives us ability to take care of ourselves, to be an energy producer, and also be able to invest in the technology for the energy future.
Senator Manchin played a key role in shaping this new budget bill after he previously stood in the way of a similar bill with a much larger price tag.
If Manchin goes along with it, he is eagerly participating in bankrupting coal miners in the state of West Virginia. I don't know how you justify that when you go back home.
All Republicans are expected to oppose the bill, forcing all 50 Democrats to vote yes to pass it. Senator Kyrsten Sinema has reserved from showing her support for the bill. Senate Leader Chuck Schumer is aiming for an end-of-the-week deadline to pass it. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The Biden administration is planning to give identification cards to illegal immigrants. A pilot program from Immigration and Customs Enforcement is now in the works. An ICE spokesperson told the Epoch Times in an email that the program is intended to modernize documentation provided to some non-citizens. The spokesperson said that the ID cards will replace the current paperwork, which is difficult to manage, degradable, and possesses security risks. Republican lawmakers have expressed concerns over the cards. Congressman James Comer, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, and Congressman Glenn Grothman sent a letter to ICE. They said that the cards will only encourage illegal immigration by rewarding illegal immigrants for breaking U.S. laws. In southern border states, state-level officials have taken a different approach with regard to policy, specifically governors of Arizona and Texas. We had a chance to speak with former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf to get his thoughts on the approach some of these border state officials have been taking. Secretary Chad Wolf, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Secretary, with regard to the border crisis, are you satisfied with what you're seeing in terms of government officials in Arizona and Texas and the way they're handling this?
Well, I think there's two things to look at, right? First of all, there's federal officials operating in those states and other states along the border. They're not doing their job at the end of the day, right? This administration has decided not to enforce immigration law, not to enforce the rule of law along that border. And so it's causing, unfortunately, states like state of Texas and state of Arizona and others having to do their job, having to pick up the slack that the federal government should be doing. And so now they're having to do more and more and more. They're having to spend resources. They're having to use authorities that they perhaps have not used before to try to protect their citizens and their community along that border. And so I think it's a dangerous situation we're in. These state officials shouldn't have to do that. It should be the federal government enforcing the law along that border, enforcing immigration law. But when they choose not to do that, and it's a policy choice more than anything else, when they choose not to do that, governors like Governor Abbott, Governor Ducey, and others have to step up and do the job for them. So that's what we're seeing today.
And one of those things that we're seeing them do, specifically in Texas, is classifying this as an invasion to open up other possibilities. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we know that the Attorney General in Arizona has issued a rule. I don't know that the state of Texas has issued a similar legal finding yet. But again, it gives some authorities, and it gives some unique authorities to the governor there that will allow them to push individuals back across that border. I think what people have to understand is if you don't live in Texas or you don't live along that border, then you really just don't understand it. And unfortunately, we've been saying that. That's why you need the president, you need the vice president, you need other folks of this administration to go down there and see what's occurring on that border. It's not just a couple of hundred folks here and a couple of hundred folks there. When you have over 100,000, 200,000 illegal apprehensions every single month, the vast majority of those are in the Rio Grande Valley. Their systems, their public infrastructure, their education systems are overwhelmed. And they need to do something different. There needs to be another solution. We can't say that this is going to continue for another 2 years and throw our hands up and say, well, that's just the way it is. I think the folks along that border in the state of Texas and elsewhere are saying, no, look, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to have to take some innovative and new approaches to securing our border. But at the end of the day, this is the job and the responsibility of the federal government. They need to do their job.
That was going to be my next question for you. How to raise the level of concern throughout the country, not just in border states, with regard to potential terrorists coming over the border, the drugs that we see. You know, there's the out of sight, out of mind human nature aspect. So how would you...
I think there's a couple of things at play, right? We talk about the human trafficking, which is terrible enough, right? But then you also talk about the criminals, the national security threats. You talk about the number of opioids and fentanyl coming across that border that are killing Americans every single day in our communities. And that's enough, right? But if you look at polling, poll after poll after poll, when they talk about border security and immigration, the vast majority of Americans do not agree with the policies of this administration. And for whatever reason, this administration has decided to put their head in the sand and say, well, we're just going to continue to do this very unpopular strategy, very unpopular approach that's not working for any Americans, but we're just going to continue down. I think that's the wrong approach, and I think most Americans believe it's the wrong approach, and I think there's going to be some consequences for that. We're starting to see that already in South Texas with a number of political races down there. These are counties, these are districts that have been Democrat for almost over 100 years in some cases. And one of the issues that they're all running on is border security, right? Because it doesn't matter what demographics or population you are, you don't like to see the rule of law being abused. And that's what's going on every single day at that border, and I think people are tired of it.
Secretary Chad Wolf, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.